Okay, it's 7 o'clock, and I am calling to order the meeting of the Common Council of the City of Platteville. Today is Tuesday, November 11th, 2014, and it's 7 p.m. We're in the council chambers in the City Hall in Platteville. I would say that the council president, Eileen Nichols, is on her way, and I will conduct the meeting until she arrives. So that's the call to order. Roll call.
Barb Stockhausen,
Yes.
Dick Bonin,
Here.
Ken Killian,
Here.
Amy Seaboth Wilson,
Here.
Mike Den,
Here.
and Barbara Doss.
Here. The first thing on our agenda tonight is consideration of the consent calendar. The following items may be approved on a single motion and vote due to their routine nature or previous discussion. Please indicate to me if you would prefer separate discussion and action on any of these items. The minutes of the 10/28/14 regular council meeting, payment of bills, the financial reports for October, appointments to boards and commissions, and President Nichols has asked me tonight to appoint Suzanne Buchert to the Museum Board, and licenses, 1- and 2-year operator licenses, and those are 1-year licenses to Devontae Shaw and 2-year operator licenses to Blake Alley and Claire Eichhoff. Do I hear a motion on the consent calendar?
Move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Ken Killian, seconded by Dick Bonin to approve the consent calendar as presented. We'll vote.
Stockhausen,
Yes.
Bonin,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes.
Seaboth Wilson,
Yes.
Den,
Yes.
Doss.
Yes.
Motion carries.
The next thing on our agenda is citizens' comments, observations, and petitions, if any. And I have one person who has requested to appear before the council, and so Kathy Kopp, if you would like to go to the microphone, and Kathy and others who may use that microphone tonight, we've had some reports that if you get too close or too far, or anyway, that microphone is cutting out. So try not to be too close, but not too far, but speak into it. How's that?
How's that?
About a
We'll try
foot away.
that.
I won't move.
Hopefully this person will call and tell us if
What?
it's
I'm too
working.
close?
Yes. About a foot away.
A foot away.
How's that? Good?
That's fine.
We'll try.
Okay. What I have, I just really want to real quickly make sure that the council is aware of all of the holiday activities that are happening. The very first sheet in your packet is the holiday community calendar. And I like to tell people that this is really a conversation piece, because if you ever hear somebody say there's nothing to do in this town, show them this. The front page is about events that are happening in November, and on the back is the events that are happening in December. So that's for the next basically month and a half. That's a lot of things going on. So I wanted to make sure that you had that. And then in the rest of the packet, I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of all of the activities specifically going on in the Platteville community for the holidays. We are tagging this once again as Christmas in the Heartland. And the second page is about Thanksgiving weekend in Platteville, the events that we're having. It's a weekend that we bring Santa. There's a free movie for kids, and we're also celebrating Small Business Saturday on the Saturday after Thanksgiving. Our big Santa Bucks promotion, which is our shop local promotion, which tracks nearly $250,000 worth of expenditures in our community every year, kicks off this next week with Business Holiday Open House starting on Friday the 21st of November, and it goes through the end of December. But so there's all kinds of activities with that. And on Small Business Saturday, which is the Saturday morning after Thanksgiving, we are encouraging everyone to convene at 9 o'clock in the morning in front of Badger Brothers downtown Main Street, where we're going to issue a proclamation on Small Business Saturday. We really want to raise the awareness of how important our small businesses are to a community. So hopefully you can join us for that. This year on December 13th, we're hosting a Living Windows Walk. We chose that day. It's 2 hours in the afternoon. It's the weekend of the university commencement, so we know we're going to have a lot of out-of-town guests. So one more thing to encourage people to come downtown and enjoy Main Street. We're doing a holiday window decorating contest, actually that the judging will take place next week. And with that is, we've asked the city to get the holiday decorations up. We're going to have music on Main Street. Main Street program is organized, free gift wrapping on Small Business Saturday. So there's just lots and lots of things. And in particular, I would like you to know that the chamber has made arrangements and got an okay from the city that we are, once again, going to light the approximate 60-foot tree in City Park as a community holiday tree. So that will take place on Friday night after Thanksgiving. It's when Santa comes. We have treats for the kids. There's going to be caroling, cookies, cocoa, the whole 9 yards for a true celebration of the Platteville community for holiday. And then one final comment that I have is that as one member of the Southwest Wisconsin Chamber Alliance, we are hosting a retirement reception for Senator Dale Schultz on Tuesday, November 18th at Southwest Technical College from 1 to 3. So if anybody can make that, it'd be a great way to acknowledge Dale for his many years of service to our region. So thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Any other, I see that we have several, I believe, students in the audience. So is there one person who's a spokesperson who could come to the microphone and at least tell us who you're representing and perhaps why you're here? Or what you hope to learn?
My name's Abby Schreiber, and we're here on behalf of UW Platteville's Introduction to Infrastructure course. We're learning about how different infrastructure relates to the community and through different projects in the area. And we see there's quite a listing of like the sewer and the stormwater treatment and the finances there, so that's what we're looking into.
Thank you, and welcome. Okay, let's go on to reports on our agenda. There are several committee reports, the first being Police and Fire Commission.
Nothing to add.
Nothing.
I
Plan
have something
Commission?
to add.
Plan Commission, nothing to add, Ken?
I have something to add to police and fire.
Oh, you
I
have
talked to the
something.
chief beforehand, and I asked him about why the speed is so great on Main Street. So I was there about 2 weeks ago, and this truck came down the street 30 miles an hour. I didn't feel like putting it out in my hand and asking the person to stop, he would have run over me.
Duly noted. We do enforcement there, and if we need more, we'll try and arrange that.
We should become known as a city that has a Main Street 15 miles per hour.
That's what the speed limit is.
I know what it is, but they're not traveling that. So are we gonna have more enforcement, or what's gonna happen?
Like I said, we will address the issue.
Okay. It's just too fast. Thank you.
Okay, Plan Commission, Councilman Den and Nichols. Councilman Den, nothing to add. Redevelopment Authority, that's me, I have nothing to add. Other reports that were in the packet, the airport financial report, the water and sewer financial report, the city attorney itemized statement, and the department progress reports. Anybody with any questions on any of those? Or comments? Okay, then let's go on to action items on our agenda tonight. The first is the design of the entry signage. And I believe that that's Jody's item. So Jody, do you want to leave, or is Larry going to do it, or what's going to go on here? Larry's going to take it for you, okay.
I'll make an effort. Jody worked very hard over the past year with a group of community residents to put together an image for the city council to consider for our next community sign. If you watch as you enter the community, there are signs off to the right-hand side that say, welcome to Platteville. And those signs are in need of replacement. So the city council did budget money in 2014, and we are planning to carry that money over for 2015 to replace those signs. And in your packet tonight, what we're asking for is an approval on what the design of those signs will look like.
And basically, this is a sign that says Platteville welcomes you. It's on a base that looks similar to the bases of the statues in City Park. And then the sign is in what I would call agriculture-friendly colors of brown, light brown, green, and some blue. So I think what we're looking for is approval for the design of the sign so that we can then move forward. I was on this committee, move forward for places to place it. There'll have to be easements and those kinds of things, but we need to know if this is going to be the size so that in fact you can obtain an easement for the correct amount of space. So questions?
I'll give my comment from last time. I feel like I'm voting for an unknown. Do you have a better pictures of this?
That,
Is this it? Yep. This is it. Well, it's hard to tell colors, what their colors really are.
Ken, I believe we have an electronic version of this sign. If you would like to come in and see it, we can bring it up on a computer for you.
You want to see this one? See mine?
I'll take a look at yours.
There you go.
Eat that party.
Not much better. But I'll vote for it.
That's good news. You want to make a motion?
do I hear a motion?
Do I hear?
I second it.
Okay, motion by Barb Stockhausen, second by Dick Bonin to approve the design for the entry sign. We'll vote?
Stackhausen,
Yes?
Bonin,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes.
Seaboth Wilson,
Yes.
Den,
Yes.
Doss.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, we'll move on to the next action item, which is, Mike, I'm gonna have to borrow your, losing these. Kallenbach Development Agreements, and there are four, in this particular, portion of the agenda for us to look at. So the Kallenbach Development Agreements, let's start, for 565 West Cedar, 255 Division, 335 Division, and 420 and 440 Southwest Road. So I guess actually I stand correcting myself, there are five. Joe?
Yes, there are five, but 420 and 440 Southwest Road are together. They're going to combine the properties and do a different development, so it's one agreement. The development agreements themselves are the same as what you had approved for the other properties previously. I did change the may to shall that we made in the other properties. The one note that I would like to comment on would be the property at 335 Division Street. If you recall, last time we mentioned there was a issue raised about that property because it's a contributing structure in the Division Street Historic District. There is a statute that says any municipally owned property that is historically designated, before we're allowed to sell it, we have to place an easement on that property. That easement would maintain the historic integrity of that structure. So we have not developed the actual easement language yet, but we do need to do that. I have talked to the bidder on that. She is aware of it. She is okay with it at this point, obviously up until she sees the specific language. But the intent on that property was to keep the structure and renovate it. So at least in theory, there should be no issues with that easement on there. So we will have to develop an actual easement language, document the current condition of the property, and that will have to be a requirement of that sale. So the approval of that sale of that particular property should include a provision that a historic easement be drafted, and I guess it would have to be recorded as part of that transaction. Otherwise, as I mentioned, the agreements themselves are the same as what we had approved for the previous properties.
When,
Okay, and I do see that 335 Division Street in their Exhibit A says the redevelopment construction will consist of renovating and repairing the existing house structure, so it's not like it was one of the properties that was scheduled to be demolished.
Correct.
Okay. Barb, did you have a
when
question?
do you plan to finish that agreement during this procedure? Will it meet the deadline?
We will have to have an easement in place and recorded as part of that
So
transaction.
I would suggest that any motion be to approve the signing of these development agreements with the additional stipulation at 335 Division Street, including pending development of, development and recording of a historic easement. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I would just suggest that in addition to approving the development agreements, that you specify that for Division Street if you're comfortable with these development agreements. Questions?
Not now.
Will the easement come to the council?
Not unless you would desire that to come to the council.
I think we've had these brought forth enough.
Do you have
A
any,
historic, what is it?
to,
Explain what a historic easement is, Joe.
The easement would put restrictions on the property that it has to maintain the historic integrity of the structure or the property. I mean, the main thing is that it would prevent the property from being raised, the building from being raised in the future. It would also prevent any significant alteration of the structure that would destroy the historic character of that building.
And this is required, if I understand you right, because the city took ownership of the property.
Correct.
And this is a requirement put on by the historic,
There's a provision in state statutes
Statute.
that requires, since it is municipally owned property, that's the first trigger, and it is a designated historic property. It's a contributing building in the Division Street Historic District, which is a state national historic district. That requirement applies. So there is, for instance, the 255 Division Street property, which is also under consideration, is in that same historic district. However, it is a non-contributing structure, so those requirements do not apply. The other properties are not in a historic district, so the requirements do not apply. So of all the ones that we have dealt with, this is the only one that this restriction comes into play.
and if this house had in fact been owned by an individual and bought by another individual, this wouldn't have come into play.
Correct.
The only reason this comes into play is because the city took ownership of this property and now is selling this property. And so it's likely to be a pretty standard easement language that has been developed by the historic group, whoever, in Madison or in statute.
The statute itself doesn't contain the easement language. The state has provided us with a sample that we can work off of.
My own curiosity, why is 255 Division a non-contributing structure? Is that what you called it?
Yes.
Why is that non-contributing?
Not historical.
Because of the condition of the structure itself, it was included in the district to maintain a contiguous boundary for that district. In other words, there were properties on either side of it that were worthy of being included in that district.
Oh,
But that structure itself,
is it just not as well kept? Because they're
yeah,
both old.
I think it had been altered enough over the years, or it didn't have enough significance by itself originally. I'm not sure which. Probably a combination of the two.
Okay,
Was no longer deemed to be
historically
historic,
significant.
that
Okay.
it had to be considered.
Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't it about 5 or 6 years ago that we had that somebody came in and actually, it wasn't anybody from the city, but it was somebody from maybe Madison.
Yeah, the city actually hired a consultant to do a historic survey of the community, and they're, a trained historian, so they developed a list of properties that they recommended for designation. Then there was a application made for the actual designation of that district, which is approved actually through the federal government.
Okay, so we're not saying anything about the house itself, it's just that at that time, that's how it was. I mean,
Correct.
so it's not like we're saying this is a, okay, so do I hear any motion on these development agreements for 565 West Cedar, 255 Division, 420 and 440 Southwest Road, and then also for 335 Division Street with the additional requirement that that would be approved pending development and recording of a historic easement?
I move to approve for the 5 properties with the addition of the easement to 335 Division Street.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Ken, seconded by Amy, to approve the Kallenbach development agreements for these properties. We'll vote?
Stockhausen,
Yes?
Bonin,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes.
Seaboth Wilson,
Yes.
Den,
Yes.
Doss.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. This is the property sale and redevelopment proposal for 1536 County Highway B. This is another of the Kallenbach properties. Joe, would you like to talk about this particular proposal?
Yeah, this is basically the only remaining property that we had put up for bid for sale. We received and actually approved, at least theoretically, a sale of this property to Dwayne Wagner. He was the high bidder on that property. He is still interested in purchasing the property. However, he does have some concerns with moving forward on that. This is one of the properties that Leonard Kallenbach has submitted an appeal regarding basically the sheriff's sale of this property to the city. So we are going through that legal process now. Mr. Wagner's concern is that if that appeal doesn't go in the favor of the city, is he going to be out the purchase price of that property? If you recall, the actual development agreement itself that we drafted, included provisions as far as the timeline that these bidders have to do the renovations. We built in additional language to the 3 properties that are impacted by this appeal that basically says that clock doesn't start ticking until the appeal rights are completed. But he's still concerned about the actual purchase. If we go through the closing, he pays for this property, $50-some thousand, and like I said, the city doesn't come out on the winning end of this. Is he going to be out that money? So that's primarily his concern. He has basically said he would be willing to go through with the closing of the property, take ownership. Could the city delay payment? He'd put money in escrow. He'd put, earnest money down, but he is concerned about losing that purchase price. So he's wondering if the council would have any interest in, through some process, delaying the payment of those funds or the closing of the property, sale of the property. And I would point out that there are 2 other properties that are also subject to that appeal, 430 South Chestnut Street and 235 3rd Street. At least at this point, those bidders have indicated they're still interested in purchasing, and actually the 235 3rd Street, that transaction has already been completed. The 430 South Chestnut Street, we have not scheduled the closing on that yet. I know that bidder does have some concerns about this appeal. He has not indicated at this point if he's not going to go forward with that closing. So there may be some ramifications of your decision regarding this property and how it may affect the other property.
Brian, do you have any update on the appeal, what we can expect?
The final brief was filed, that can be filed by either party last week. And so we're looking for a decision sometime in the next 6-7 months. I don't want to be optimistic on that.
I love it. The final appeal that could be filed, that ever could be filed, was filed last week, but it's
The
going to take
final
7.
brief,
Oh, brief.
brief.
The
If I
final
said
brief.
appeal, I didn't
I'm
mean that.
sorry, it was my failure to use the appropriate lawyer language here. The final brief.
Final
was
brief
filed.
in
But
this
now it
appeal.
takes 7 months, okay, maybe, or more.
It could take more, you know, there's an outside chance that it could take less. We're just looking at, Attorney Pelletier, we've talked it over. You know, we're looking, if it happened before March, we would think it happened fast.
And this particular individual's concern is he pays his $51,500 now. The appeal doesn't go in favor of the city, so he really doesn't own the property. So what happens to his $51,500 that he's paid the city? Am I encapsulating his concern in a correct manner?
You are. You know, this is the problem with the case going up on appeal, and let's say that the court rules in favor of the appellant, Kallenbach LLC. And the claim is that the sheriff's sale was not conducted properly, and that the city should have given the LLC notice. And it's not at all clear in this, we gave all kinds of notice. But they didn't feel it was adequate. So how does the appeals court rule on this and unscramble this egg? Because there wasn't just a sale that went on that day. There was 15 properties sold that day. And everyone had a chance to bid. And the city bid, and there were other parties that bid. And so the amounts that were bid on each properties were, you know, a function of who was interested at that point in time. And from the city's perspective, the amount the city bid was, you know, kind of a careful calculation of what we thought these properties would bring minimum amount, so that we didn't put too much money on any one property. So if this bidding process was determined to not be done satisfactorily, we're going to, presumably, we're going to go back and we're going to have another sheriff's sale on properties that have already been sold twice now. And then I would assume that we're going to have another advertisement, that these 3 properties are going to come up for a
Sale.
bid process, and that the city's going to be able to bid on them. Other landlords are going to be able to bid on them. Anyone who's, is it Irish on this one? Or Wagner? Wagner is going to come in and say, well, you know, I'd bid, except I already paid for it. All the money that's being bid is going to end up going to the city. So if Mr. Wagner goes in and bids, and he's the highest bidder, then, you know, I'd look at that and say, well, if he bid no more than what he already paid, then we probably owe him either 0 or something back if he won that bid again, or if he bid more, then he probably owes us some more money. And if somebody else comes in and bids more than what Mr. Wagner bid, they'd pay us the money, and then seems to me like we would have to pay Mr. Wagner back in order to be fair. Again, I don't know how you unscramble this egg, so I'm putting together what I perceive to be some kind of reasonable scenario. In the what I view, in my opinion, as the unlikely event that the city does not prevail.
I have a question. The earnest money, if Mr. Wagner puts in earnest money, would he get that back?
Earnest money's held normally pending a sale.
Right.
So if the sale didn't close, and it did not close at, so I'll just put it this way, no fault of the buyer, then he would be deserving of his earnest money back.
And then who pays he also talks about the closing costs. Who pays the closing costs? Are they shared, or does he pay them? Or the city?
Closing costs have been allocated mostly to the city's side of the ledger.
Okay, and he talks about paying earnest money and even closing on the property. How can you close on a property that you don't own?
There's the problem with these transactions that are sort of in limbo. If we say, fine, we'll close, you give the money, we'll let a third party hold it.
Okay.
Okay, well, what are they holding it for? They're holding it pending some future event. And in the interim, then, does the city continue to hold title to that property, or does the conveyance occur at that point? If the conveyance occurs immediately and we're just waiting to get our money, then title's in buyer's name, but the city hasn't got the money. And if then the appeal goes awry from the city's standpoint, then the city, I guess, would give the money back, and the person that was gonna own it, but, isn't gonna own it, would have to convey it back to the city. That's bad from the standpoint that anything bad that happens to buyer while they hold that title gets stuck on that real estate, and there isn't any way of getting it off of it.
Yeah.
Very, very easy. Okay, so let's flip the scenario around. City holds the property, waiting for the outcome of the appeal, and then, buyer's money's in this account sitting there. The property is in the city's name as of January 1. At that point, the property is no longer taxable for that coming year, and the city bears the risk of loss if something bad happens to that property other than losing the appeal. I mean, if somebody goes in and burns the place down, trashes it, act of God, and it's destroyed, the city bears the risk of that loss, and buyer, I'm presuming, isn't going to buy it no matter how the appeal turns out.
So what is the recommendation of the subcommittee?
So, we basically, after discussing a lot of these pros and cons, at least I'll say for myself, I was leaning toward offering the sale to the next person on the list. For many reasons, among them, there are two other people who have already placed either a final sale or a pending sale on similarly situated properties, and we didn't really want to open a can of worms by starting a precedence. And then the second reason is a major goal of the sale was to get these properties back on the tax roll by the end of this fiscal year, or the end of this year, calendar year. And if we wait, that will not happen. Those were my two primary, mine. I don't know, Mike, did you have a different opinion on it?
I did, because I thought Mr. Wagner should be allowed, since he had the highest bid, and that's what we were looking at in this particular property, somebody that would do a very good job with the property, and since his bid was higher, we felt that we would also like to see him have that. And in reference to a couple of the other properties that have already been closed on, that was already done, so that wouldn't necessarily be a fallback on this property. We discussed that in the commission, the little meeting that we had.
So, point of correction, I guess, just to clarify for everybody's sake, the subcommittee did not come up with a recommendation on whether or not we should grant the extension. The subcommittee came up with a recommendation of, should the extension not be granted by the council, what would we do?
Correct,
So we didn't come up with a consensus as a subcommittee on the issue at hand.
correct. We had different opinions.
The basic point is you have to wait for the appeal to be completed.
Not necessarily, because 2 other properties have basically sold without the appeal being completed at this point. One, and one was sold, one's closer to being sold than the one we are looking at right now. And then there's this one. And so they bought the property knowing there was an appeal placed on it, and that's
But
their,
they might lose it.
That's
that's
their
their problem
problem.
then.
That's gonna be their issue, not ours.
Well, actually, yes and no. As Brian explained, if the city is not if the appellant is successful and these go to sheriff's sale again and people bid on them again and these people, the city still owns them. The appeal isn't that the city doesn't own them.
Unscrambling the eggs, a little hard to imagine, right?
Right. I mean, that's not really the appeal, right? That the city doesn't own them.
Correct. The appeal's saying that the sheriff's sale was not conducted with proper notice. So are you going back and saying, okay, lower, appeals court saying to lower court, you have to order the sheriffs to reconduct a bid?
In which case, we wouldn't technically own them anymore.
Well,
Potentially.
does the order require that everything that went on before the sheriff's sale sort of be put back to where it was? At which point
Yes.
then, Kallenbach, Darrell owns these properties again, and they're gonna conduct another sheriff's sale. The city's gonna come in and bid, I would guess, would bid at least what they were paid. And then whoever else would be interested now would come in and bid. And are we gonna wait another 15 months to see if he's gonna redeem? I mean, so these kinds of questions, I don't know how long this drags out. It seems rather silly that appeals court would rule this way, but we'll find out.
Because the sheriff's proper procedure was followed, as far as we are aware, along every step of the way. So if the appeals court ruled against the way things were done, it would be very surprising.
Correct.
And we would appeal.
Yeah, it's a mess.
And there's one more court that we could go to.
One of the problems involved for Mr. Wagner is not so much that the money issue, it's how long his money would be out of circulation. And if he's gonna pay interest on that money, he'd be paying interest on money for a long time if he had to come up with the whole thing right away. I think that we should actually go along with Mr. Wagner's opinion of what he wants, let him put some earnest money up and go through with whatever we need to do paperwork-wise for the sale, or delay of sale, but it's still gonna be I don't know how you do that, Brian, I'm not familiar with that. But that way, in the end, we would have a very good taxable piece of property when he gets done with it.
I've tried to point out that either way, the city holding the property until the appeal is resolved, or the city
Find
selling the
funds.
property, and then waiting to see how the appeal turns out, both of those ways are flawed.
Yes, I agree.
Well, what is the best way?
Sell it.
Okay, let's do it.
And to sell it, partly because that reduces some of our troubles in the meanwhile and liability. It gets it back on the tax rolls, and it doesn't start a precedence for the other 2 properties that have already gone through this.
Do you remember who was the next person in line for this property?
John and Dustin Dugan.
Dugan,
They're very
Okay.
good people.
right on your,
And Joe, you said
Yeah,
you checked with
we-
them and
we
they
had
were
some
still
good-
interested?
Yes.
All right, folks, we've had a lot of discussion. Has anybody got any more questions? And are we ready to have anybody offer a motion?
I move that we
so to the next.
sell this piece of property to John and Dustin Dugan with a bid of $45,010.
Second.
You may, Joe, do we know for 100% that the current highest bidder will not buy it under any circumstance?
Well,
Oh.
that was gonna be my suggestion, I guess. Do we give him,
I remove my
you know,
motion, okay.
do we give him 10 days to sign all the documents, and if not, we go to the next guy, or, I don't, that's what I had
Yep.
been thinking of as well.
That seems.
All
I
right.
don't know what
Barb, would you
time
like to
period we give 'em.
restate your motion
5 days?
with some consideration for
And the
Mr.
extension.
Wagner?
5 days? Are we hearing 5 days?
I'm going to move that we add that recommended extension, the 10-day extension for Mr. Wagner to make
10 or 5?
10. Sorry, that's 2 weeks.
You may want to think more about 5.
Okay,
Okay, because
5
how
then.
this is gonna go, we've got to now get to the other bidder, they've got to get us an offer, we got to get a title commitment, and it's now mid-December.
When does this 5 days start? Next Monday?
How
Or
about
today?
tomorrow?
Okay, tomorrow then until next Tuesday, right? Okay, that's what I make my motion on.
Okay, so we're giving Mr. Wagner until next Tuesday
I'm
morning.
sorry. Does,
That would be
okay,
November,
That would make sense. Never mind.
November 18th? Is that the,
That'd be correct.
if Mr. Wagner responds by noon on November 18th, then we move forward with Mr. Wagner. Otherwise, your motion is to move forward after that time with John and Dustin Dugan. Do I
Yes.
understand that? Okay, is that understood, Joe?
Yes.
Barb Stockhausen makes the motion. Dig, are you seconding that? Okay, so we're voting on this. This Kallenbach property at 1536 County Highway B. We're giving the original bidder, Mr. Wagner, until next Tuesday, November 18th at noon to make his decision regarding this property. If he declines the property, then it will be offered to the next highest bidder, who are John and Dustin Dugan, at the bid price of $45,010. We'll vote.
Stockhausen,
Yes,
Bonin,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes,
Seaboth Wilson,
Yes.
Den,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay, next thing on our agenda.
I ask one question, Barb, for.
Yes.
Now, if this goes to the second party, what if they change and want a lower offer or a lower amount of money? Or
They
we got
can't,
them
they
locked?
have they've submitted their bid.
Okay.
So, I mean, I think that's their bid price. If they say, well, no, we only want to pay 15, then I suspect that the subcommittee will be reconvening and reevaluating what comes next.
Okay,
And I see a lot of head shaking from the subcommittee, so I think that I probably assumed correctly. All right, the next item on our agenda is the contract for snow and ice removal, as if we're gonna need that. I didn't make that comment.
Okay. This is our annual contract for snow and ice removal for a removal of sidewalks in front of properties that do not shovel their own walks. The contractor's charge plus a $20 administrative fee per parcel is billed to the owner. We provided bid packages to 5 local firms who have worked with the city. We received 1 bid from Four Seasons Landscaping, and their price is 20 cents a square foot or a $40 minimum charge for snow removal, 25 cents a square foot or $50 minimum charge for ice and packed snow removal. And one of the main differences between this year and last year is that this year we are requiring the contractor to provide their own salt if it is allowed to be used. In previous years, we allowed the contractor to use salt from the city garage. I'm recommending award to Four Seasons Landscaping.
Okay, questions? Do I hear a motion?
no question. Do these bids have to have a proof of insurance, liability, and workman's comp? Because I realize there'll be hired people doing this.
Yes.
Is that all shows on the bids?
That's part of our standard contract
Okay.
clauses.
Any other questions?
so the basic charge, just if somebody shovels the sidewalk, minimum charge is $50.
The minimum charge would be actually $60.
Plus
$40 to Four Seasons Landscaping
Yeah.
and a $20 administrative fee.
Can I make a motion?
Oh, you certainly may.
I make a motion that we award the contract 1814 snow and ice removal to Four Seasons Landscaping at the bid price of 20 cents per square foot with a $40 minimum charge for snow removal and 25 cents per square foot with a $50 minimum charge for ice and packed snow removal.
Second.
Can people appeal this charge?
They generally do so to me, and if they do not receive satisfaction, they go to the city manager.
And what does the city manager do?
What do I do?
Yes.
I review the photograph, review the comments from the person making the appeal, as well as from staff, and make a determination as to whether the fee is appropriate. We have seen it in the past where we had people who did not like the determinations made on appeal, and they've attended city council meetings. So I think providing people with the avenue of having 3 times to appeal an issue is certainly very generous. But having a $60 charge makes it all that much more important that people shovel their sidewalks.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the contract, regardless of whether someone appeals or believes that this is the amount that the city will need to pay the contractor. So, motion and a second, we'll vote.
Stockhausen,
Yes.
Bonin,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes.
Seaboth Wilson,
Yes.
Den,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is Resolution 1420A approving financial assistance for a housing project. So, Larry, do you want to talk about this one, please?
I certainly can. We've had discussion with a development company, JNB Platteville Family, and they're proposing to build 30 to 34 housing units for low-income and moderate-income individuals and families. And as a result, or in order to do that construction, they have to apply for tax credits through the state of Wisconsin. And so local community involvement in the project helps generate points to get tax credits awarded. The developer has asked the city to help and to participate in the project. And the city council has discussed, and we've put together a resolution with 4 different ways that we intend to help the project generate points in their application from the state. We've added infrastructure to the location at a cost of $110,000. We've decided that we would add a bus stop to the location in the future to help generate another point under the application process. We've also are offering a $100,000 cash grant to the developer, as well as a loan of $265,000 to the developer. These incentives, when the project is completed, would generate a $5 million taxable property to the city of Platteville.
It's been mentioned already, where's the cash grant money coming from?
I believe at the time the discussion occurred, the city council anticipated using the income that we received from the sale of the Kallenbach homes.
It's true.
Right. Yep.
I asked the question so the public has an idea.
And it should be noted that at this point in time, anyway, pending huge, lengthy, involved appeals, that the city is in the positive on the Kallenbach properties.
Yes.
And would have this revenue that is not tax revenue to do this.
And then as long as we're explaining it, I'd like to add that single or affordable family housing is one of the top priorities identified by the city right now. So this fits that priority very well.
That's correct. Last June, the city council set goals for the city, and that was one of the top 3.
I did have a call today from a taxpayer that was a little upset with this, so I thought I'd mention it. I didn't think we should be doing it.
Well, I would note that the $110,000 in infrastructure is already in. That was
Correct.
part of the redevelopment of Fourth Street last year. So that infrastructure actually is in this location and is bankable, if you want to call it, for this development, so that's not new money. The shuttle bus stop is really not a cost item. The $100,000 cash grant, as we just explained, is not taxpayer money, but is from the sale of the Kallenbach properties. And then the other incentive, the $265,000, is a loan that will be paid back at a rate of 2.5%, which I believe will borrow money at a lesser rate. So in many ways, this is a way to encourage development of low and medium income housing without great expense to the city.
Will there be a development agreement?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, there will.
And when will that come?
Well, the application, I believe, is not due to the state of Wisconsin for the tax credits until the end of January. If the project goes forward, the funding would be due at the time of occupancy, which would likely be in 2016. I do believe a development agreement would be appropriate before construction occurs and after the tax credits are awarded, if they're awarded.
And I think that award date is around tax day, April 15th, if I remember correctly.
I have one question, but mainly for the public to hear. The repayment of this, is it made to the city or is it made directly to a bank by the developer on this 265?
The way it'll be structured is the city will borrow it at X%. We will charge more than that percentage to the developer, and so the payments would be made from the developer to the city, and then the city would capture a percentage or a share of that interest, and then turn around and make the payments with the bank.
Or the lender,
Or the lender.
not necessarily a bank, but the lender.
But the city will have a second mortgage?
Yes, I believe it was structured as a second. That'll all be further defined in a development agreement. The developer needs the resolution in order to apply for the tax credits, and that application is due within the next month or two.
I also want to mention that we are in real need in this community for housing, for a multifamily housing for low and moderate income individuals. And this is a great location. It's close to parks, it's close to schools. Now that there is a contact point for a bus stop, there is transportation that'll be determined. And I think we need to continue with this process and make a recommendation. Accept it. Oh, one more question.
One
Yeah,
more question.
one more question?
Yeah, on this 265 borrowed in, does that affect our borrowing power or go against our?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Do I hear a motion?
I move that we accept the resolution approving financial assistance for a housing project located at 1245 North 4th Street in Platteville, Wisconsin by J&B Platteville Family LP.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt resolution number 1428, approving financial assistance for a housing project. We'll vote.
Stockhausen,
Yes?
Bonin,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes.
Seaboth Wilson,
Yes.
Den,
Yes.
Doss.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is resolution 1429, and this one deals with hiring a consultant to assist the city in environmental assessment. Larry?
The city of Platteville would like to take an aggressive or a slightly more aggressive approach at trying to ensure redevelopment opportunities in our downtown. And as part of that, we have a need for a consultant to help us with some blight and some possible environmental concerns. This resolution would authorize staff to move forward and hire a consultant to look at the redevelopment of some properties in our downtown. The properties in our downtown are identified in TID number 7, and it is a goal of TID number 7 to further redevelop our downtown. We've also established redevelopment district number 1 for our downtown. So this movement has been planned for and identified in several different plans, and it's certainly something that the city has identified as a goal to further proceed with. So this resolution would authorize staff to hire an environmental consultant to begin to look at some of the downtown properties.
One question, Larry.
Yes.
Would this person also assist in a grant writing?
Yes, it would. To do the environmental studies that we would like to see done in our downtown, we're anticipating at least 2 or 3 different grant applications in order to pay for those studies. So we would use this consultant to do grant writing and to help with that study.
Thank you.
Do we have a limit on the amount for do the assessment, or do we have it?
That's a good question, and without knowing what type of environmental issues we would have in our downtown, we need to study that in order to get our hands around how big of a concern that is for the city. It was very hard to put a price on exactly what we're going to end up doing without knowing what we're doing. So, for example, if there is contamination, to what level is it? And different levels of contamination would require different levels of expertise and expense to clean up or to study that contamination. We decided that the way to structure this agreement would be based on time and materials. And so when you look at the contract in your packet, you'll see that there's specific, let's see if I can find it real quick.
The attachments?
There's supposed to be labeled out with specific expenses.
Is that attachment A?
Oh,
I think
I'm
it's
sorry.
attachment
Yep,
C.
Attachment C.
I know there's attachment C is compensation, but there's also discussion about attachment A.
And my document doesn't have C. So I assume everybody else has attachment C in your packets?
Yep.
So it should be identified on attachment C, exactly what kinds of expenses we're looking at through this contract.
Larry, it does say standard hourly rates for, standard hourly rate for applicable employees. Did we happen to get a listing or a document that provided a listing of those standard hourly rates
Yes, we have it.
as an addendum, so that we at least know what those are on the front end going in? It also talks about reimbursable expenses, and do we have a listing that says what's reimbursable and what's not?
Yes, yeah.
Because those are not included in the packet that I have.
D to D. You have it, Ken?
So do you want to do a quick summary of
I don't, I go right from D
We
to
don't,
D.
some of us don't have Schedule C, so, or attachment C. So you'll need to
We do
clarify.
now.
Oh, we do now?
Okay.
Okay.
What I have is the cost/schedule, and I apologize if that wasn't in my packet either, although it was in the documents that should have been copied. I'm happy to just pass it around. I've got a copy here if anybody up there would like to see it. Yes,
It was in
we've
the
got, we've got the information. It simply didn't get
Okay.
photocopied.
I'm
Okay.
sharing.
So when we discussed this
Oh, here it is.
2 weeks ago, I think the challenge
up
or
here.
task back on the staff was to do some reference checking,
Yes.
and everybody was happy with this firm compared to
Yes.
others in the industry.
Yep. Joe, I don't know if you or Brian want to comment on some of that.
Yeah, I did make some reference calls based on the projects that were in their proposal. that I picked projects that sounded similar to downtown redevelopment type projects. I called Wanakee, Prairie du Chien, and Marinette. All of those references came back actually very good. It seemed to be that this firm is very good at doing what we would like them to do.
And the firm that we're talking about is not secret, because this
Ayers and
contract, it would be
Associates.
Ayers and Associates.
Correct, yes.
And they have, I believe their main office is in Eau Claire, and I don't know if this would be serviced out of Eau Claire, or if it would be serviced out of their Madison office, perhaps.
The gentleman that they have committed to working in Platteville, his name is Scott Wilson, and he'll be out of Madison.
Brian, did you also have any comments on the references or anything?
I didn't check references. We did have an opportunity to meet Mr. Wilson yesterday, and I came away favorably impressed with his knowledge of the subject matter and his ability to assist the city in this endeavor.
Okay, other questions?
Is this including that residential property, or just the other properties, the vacant one?
It'll include everything that may have contamination.
And I think that's part of the scope of the service, is where may there be contamination, and if there is, then,
Yep.
you know, how do we address it?
And they determined that by doing a phase 1 study, so they'll have to get a grant to do phase 1, then they'll get a grant and perhaps start a phase 2, depending on the results of the phase 1.
So this will be a lengthy process.
Oh, yes, yes.
I mean, we've seen other brownfield cleanups in our community, and it's not a process that's a 3 or a 4 month process. It's years. Okay, any other questions?
With no other discussion, I'd like to make a motion approving the hiring of a consultant to assist with the environmental assessment
In the downtown?
in the downtown area.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 14-29 to hire Ayers Associates as our consultant to assist with environmental assessment. We'll vote.
Stockhausen,
Yes.
Bonin,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes.
Seaboth Wilson,
Yep.
Den,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay, the next, that's the last of the action items on our agenda for tonight. The next item, the next portion of our agenda is information and discussion. The first of those is the council meeting schedule. Did we have, so,
I can comment on that.
Yeah.
That was the December city council meeting, the second one. It is scheduled currently for Tuesday, let's see if I can pull it up here.
Tuesday, December 23rd.
23rd.
And we would like to move that council meeting to Monday, December 22nd. So,
Is that in here?
actually, it was not a part of your packet. But the request is to move the second meeting for December from Tuesday, December 23rd to Monday, December 22nd. There will be a need to have this meeting. It will probably not be a lengthy meeting, but there is a need to have the meeting to deal with some of the contract issues as they relate to the taxi. So,
I think we wanted to make sure,
December 22nd, do we want to?
we need to make sure there's a quorum that can make
Yeah.
it.
Are there people in town December 22nd? It's the Monday of, and available. I believe we would hold the meeting as usual at 7 in the evening. So it would just be one night earlier in the week. Monday, December 22nd, as opposed to Tuesday, December 23rd.
Is there a planning commission or water and sewer?
Oh, this
or-
would be.
That would be the third,
okay.
this was the
Yeah.
fourth.
Yeah. So there should not be any conflicts. So, do we have to actually have that as an action item at our next meeting to move the meeting?
I think that your council president can direct that the meeting be
I
scheduled.
don't know. You may see it on for action. We'll check the appropriate whatevers to see if we have to have a actual motion on that. Okay, next on the agenda then is the, for information and discussion, is annexation and rezoning for the Platteville Municipal Airport. And Joe, do you want to start with this?
Yeah, this is going to be on for your consideration. Well, it should be a public hearing at the next meeting, but probably will not be action at that meeting because the Plan Commission tabled this item. But the request is for consideration of annexing the City of Platteville Municipal Airport. Obviously, the airport is located south of the city. It's about 544 acres. It is a city airport, so it is owned by the city. There is a process in state statutes that allows annexation of territory owned by the city to be annexed to the city, even though it's not contiguous to the current city boundaries, which is the case with this one. Essentially, all that's required is a approval by the council. We don't actually need a public hearing to consider the annexation. We scheduled the public hearing to consider the zoning designation of that property after the annexation is approved, if it is approved. The Plan Commission did consider this request at their last meeting. They had some basically requests for additional information from staff, so they did table this item, so they did not actually have a recommendation at this point. Staff does recommend approval of the request, and I did include in your fiscal note there some additional information regarding the taxes on the property and the benefits of that annexation to the city, which is essentially what the Plan Commission was asking for. But there are two primary reasons that I would say to consider the annexation. One is the placing it within the municipal boundaries places the property under the rules of the City of Platteville as far as the municipal code, and allows easier enforcement of city ordinances. The second reason would be financial. The tax revenue that's coming off of the personal property on that property, basically the privately owned hangars, would go to the city rather than the township if it's annexed. And additional construction of private hangars on that property, the building permit fees would go to the city rather than to the township building inspector. And then there's some additional information as far as the amount of money that the city has invested in that property over the years, which is what was requested by the Plan Commission. Any questions?
Well, the taxes will go up for the individuals by roughly $600.
Well, it depends on the value of
Well, he
the
said
hangar.
here that they pay $7,491 for 3 private hangars at that time. It's estimated the tax from the 4 hangars will amount to $10,000 annually, so no, it would be less. How much is it gonna go up per hangar?
Well, I mean, the difference depends on the tax rate difference between the city and the township, and I don't know exactly what that's going to be.
That'll have to be up to the
It'd
assessor.
be 2,500 divided among 4.
I don't think they know that. I feel like maybe what they're saying there is that there's 3 properties that are currently worth 7,500 approximately, but then there'll be 4 soon, and they expect that it might go up to closer to 10 when the 4th is added, right?
Actually, Dwayne, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, there's 3 properties had tax bills last year. They told $7,491. Using the same tax rate, and we don't really know what it's going to be if the assessor's going to assess the same amount, and how it works exactly. But presuming it's the same tax rate, those tax bills will be about $9,135 for those 3 properties. The 4th one, there's a 4th one out there, but that one hasn't been assessed yet, or we don't have that value for. They didn't have one for 2013. So one would go up like $103, another up $456, another $1,084. But those are all estimates based upon using the last year's mill rates.
Okay, and what you're quoting, Dwayne, are personal property taxes. Are those, and now I don't know this, so are those taxes divided by 4 by the various taxing jurisdictions, or do they all come to the city? Or do they all go to the town? So I know the township collected for $7,491. Did the township keep $7,491 or just its portion of
They
$7,000?
just basically end up keeping their portion, which I think
Okay.
was like $788, something like that, so.
Okay. So this is the total tax bill that includes the vocational school, the public school, the county and the state, plus the township, or in our case, the township portion would be replaced by the city portion. And the assessor on this property, these personal properties, is the assessor that we employ. It would be our city assessor. It would not be a state assessor. Is that correct? Or is it a state assessor?
Right, it's not a state assessor, it's the state assesses manufacturing, this is a
Okay.
private, so the township has
As an
an
assessor.
assessor, and then we use our assessor for, if it's a city, on the
Okay.
city properties.
Dwayne, when we're talking personal property out there, is that gonna also include, the radio systems, the Omni systems, their lighting, all that sort of thing?
I don't know, I'm not an assessor.
Okay.
All assessors are certified by the state, I presume they all assess the same way, so however they're assessed previously, I presume they'd be assessed the same way.
Well, the airport actually owns that now, doesn't it? The stuff he just mentioned?
Okay, I have had one person register to talk about this, and that is Bill Closter. So Bill is the chair of the, or unless he was not reelected chair last night, which I can't imagine didn't happen, is the chair of the airport commission.
Okay, Bill Closter, 975 Highbury Circle, Platteville is the address. I am the current chairman of the Airport Commission. If I understand the last question about you said the Omni, the lights and all those are owned property of the city already in the airport. The only property that we're talking about taxing here are the private hangars, privately owned hangars built on land that is leased from the city.
But once it's annexed into the city, isn't there also a personal property taxes on some of that stuff, like it is in the city? Like if you have computers and your business and so on and so forth, personal property that are taxed?
That one I don't know. I've asked the same question.
Okay. Now, they also have a land lease dollar that they lease the land the hangars are on, the people that own the private hangars, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, who determines the rate on that? Would that, do you
The Airport
folks do that?
Commission,
The Air
yes.
Force, would that stay that way then? Most likely, we don't know that. Would you-
I don't see a reason why it would change.
Okay, thank you. Now, I asked you earlier,
Mm-hmm.
pluses or minuses to doing this? One outweigh the other, or are they even?
As far as the Airport Commission is concerned, the vote on this, I reported at the City Planning Commission last week. I reported the vote was 6 in favor, 1 opposed. And last night when we went through the minutes to approve the minutes, I was informed that there was actually a second vote that I didn't hear against. So it was 5-4 and 2 against and we're just giving our well, it's not approval, it's our support to the city doing this. We are not the approving authority for this action. This is a request from the city, and we were just granting our support towards it. I really think that the city should be able to recoup some of the money that they're investing into the airport. Of course, the major investment that the city gets from having an airport like this is the potential to draw more business into the community and seek additional tax revenues through that vehicle. It also provides a recreational opportunity for some members of the community. But I think the city should be able to do that. On the other side, I can see the argument of the current owners of the hangars who state that my tax rate is going up, and yet the services that I'm receiving are not increasing drastically. You would think if you live in the city, you have a package of services that everybody receives. If you live now, if you occupy space at the airport that's annexed by the city, if you are taxed at the same rate, which I'm not sure if if that's what's happening, or is that mill rate going to be adjusted because there's no city water, gas, and other kinds of infrastructures that you would normally find in the city? I think if we could answer that question, that would go a long way to allaying some of the concerns. But I don't know if that's possible.
One other real quick question for me. The contracted land out there, the farmland that's contracted, does that dollar come to you folks on the committee or commission? Then you use it for operating expenses, or does that go to the city because it's city-owned land?
No, that money is given to the airport commission for the operation of the airport. Our revenues are generated primarily through fuel sales, the cropland rental, and then we do make a small portion off of the rental of the hangars that are owned by the city, and then these leases to the individuals who have their own hangars.
We would hope that would stay the same then if it was annexed.
It would be necessary to maintain that particular arrangement for us to be able to continue the operation of the airport.
Thank you.
I would point out that currently and Bill, you could please stay at the microphone, but my understanding of the airport budget is that the airport generates, that there's enough revenue generated for the operational expenses at the airport. But for the capital improvements at the airport, the city and city taxpayers pay for the capital improvements at the airport. So for instance, we recently held a ribbon cutting at the airport to show the new taxi lanes that were built, the hangar subdivision, I like to call it. And it was city tax money that provided the match that was needed for the federal and state dollars that were recouped. So in that way, the people who have the hangars are benefiting from being a part of the city. I would also point out that it was the city that purchased the nearly, how many acres is it?
I think it's 554.
500 acres are actually city money purchased that, and the city has also loaned the airport commission money to build hangars, and the airport commission is slowly paying that back, but nonetheless, the city carries the debt on those hangars. So sometimes it's hard for these, so I do think that there is a benefit that's being gained by the people who have the hangars, and right now, any money that is being generated through those taxes are going to the township. And Dwayne, could you tell me how much the township pays to us each year because we have the airport in the township?
Nothing?
So the township hasn't invested anything in the airport?
No.
I would like to point out that the matches that were mentioned here for the state and federal dollars are usually relatively small numbers compared to the project. They're 5 to 10%. But still, 5 to 10% of a $1 million or $2 million project to extend a runway is a significant amount of money.
And it's more than the airport can generate in fuel sales and crop rental.
Yes, it would take us several years to generate enough cash to do something like that.
So what I would like to point out is that the taxpayers of the city of Platteville are supporting the airport in its, at least the capital improvements at the airport. Any other questions about the annexation and rezoning of the airport? There'll be a public hearing next time, as Joe has mentioned. The Plan Commission tabled this. They won't take it up again until their meeting in December. And so I would expect that any action then that might come would come at the first meeting in December. So thank you, Bill.
Can you just explain a little bit more about those 3 private hangar owners that are currently they have their hangars out there? Not the new person, but the other 3. Do they have conflict with this?
I have not had any of the 3 current hangar owners express any concern to either myself or to the commission.
Okay, thank you.
Well, one of them appeared here on October 28th.
That's a new owner whose hangar has yet to be assessed.
Correct.
Well, then it's it says one of 4 people who own hangars at the Platteville Municipal Airport.
Right.
That the
That
new-
particular
new owner?
hangar, that particular hangar is brand new. I don't even think it's officially completed, so whether or not it's going to be subject to taxation this tax year or not is unknown.
So you talked about taxes. Is it possible that they wouldn't be charged as much for taxes because they're not getting as much in way of services in the city?
That I don't know. That's a legal question.
Yeah, I think that's a question not for Bill.
Well, I'm asking somebody. Bill
Bill,
or
I
the
think
attorney.
you don't need to
Or
feel
the
you have to
finance
stay at the
director.
microphone.
Not finance, but
Your question
director of
is,
administration.
if a property doesn't receive necessarily all the services, that they get taxed less? Is that the question?
That's the question.
No.
I think everybody would be in making a case at that point.
I don't think you can do it under state law.
No, you
Right.
Right,
No.
that's the same thing, like if a person didn't have children going to school, they're still assessed for school property taxes, so.
So they wouldn't have to plow the snow in front of my house?
Not the airport.
Okay, I believe that the law states that if there's a tax levy established, it's established against all property within the district, and that's the way that ball bounces, so. The next item on our agenda is the 2015 budget. Dwayne, is that gonna be you?
Okay, sure. The public hearing will be taking place on Tuesday, November 25th at 7 PM. The general fund budget totals $8,289,598. The total budget, including all the TIF districts, debt service fund, capital projects, and taxi plus special revenue fund, totals $18,630,865. The equalized valuation, the equalized value went up, as you may recall, over $60 million this year. So the equalized valuation rate went down from 759 to 721. The assessed valuation didn't go up as much, only went up 20 some million. So that the actual rate there increased from 739 per thousand to 761 per thousand. That's what's proposed at this point in time. That can still be changed at the public hearing, obviously. Are there any questions?
Okay, so the public hearing on the budget will be prior to the next meeting on November 25th. And again, as Dwayne noted, the equalized tax rate actually is 721, down from 759 last year. The assessed tax rate is up from 739 last year to 761 this year. And the tax levy will be to, Dwayne, quote me if I'm wrong on this, the tax levy will be to collect $8,289, $8,289,598. Is that correct? Will that be the levy amount?
I believe so. I'm trying to find it here quick. Here.
No, that's the total general
That's the
fund
total
revenue. You're gonna need to add the property tax line items to get the levy amount.
At the bottom of the first page, it's $3,926,194.
Lot less than I said.
That's all right.
At the bottom of the first page. Oh, yeah, because I included all the rest of the revenues. Sorry, I'm looking at, $3,955,411. Is that right?
$3,926,194, yes.
926.
It's the end of the
3,000,000.
first page.
Oh, 926. And that is up 4.83% from last year's $3,745,170.
Correct, yes.
Okay. Any other questions?
There's a question here.
One other thing, we are planning on having a public presentation to the public about our budget on November 20th at 7 p.m. at the police station. It's going to be a more of a overview of the whole overall budget. It's something we have not had in the past, but it's something we're going to be doing this year for the first time.
Okay, so repeating that, it would be Thursday, November 20th, in the Police Department conference room. A
Yes.
budget presentation on the overall budget at
7 p.m.
7 p.m.
Yes.
Okay, 7 p.m., Thursday, November 20th, at the Police Department, an overall presentation by the Department of Administration Finance on the 2015 city budget. Any and everybody is welcome to attend, right? Good. Well, that brings us to the end of our published agenda of information and discussion items. The next item on the agenda is a closed session, and then there's the possibility that we will return to open session after that closed session to take action. So do I hear a motion to go to closed session?
I move that we go to closed session per Wisconsin statutes 9.85, paren 1, paren C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. This is the city manager evaluation employment contract.
There a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We'll vote.
Stockhausen,
Yes?
Bonin,
Yes.
Killian, Seabolt Wilson,
Yes.
Den,
Yeah, vote.
Yes.
Doss.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, we'll go into, we'll have about a 5-minute recess.